Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Sacramental Charismatic podcast. My name is Wes, and I'm joining you all the way from Vancouver, Washington. Actually, my new podcast setup is in my baby's room. I've hijacked her room, so
I like
it's great. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And today I'm joined with co-host Luke Garrity. What's up?
Hello.
Luke?
Good to see all of you coming live from Northern California. Although when we publish these are not live, so I might not be in Northern California when you're listening to this.
There's a good reason they're not live.
That's true.
It's a very good reason. But anyway, Luke, what's been happening? It's been a while since we've had a podcast episode.
Yeah, you and your baby.
I've had a baby. That's probably the biggest one. Although we did release.
We did one or two since your baby.
No, because the last one we did was with Thomas. And Tom.
Was that before your baby?
That was before.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to blame it all on your baby. But your baby, Amelia, is the cutest baby ever, so I'm not going to put that on her. It's all you.
She was supposed to make a guest appearance today, but she is sleeping. So
that's true.
Unfortunately, she needs her sleeper now. But
yeah, well, that's good. But it's good to be back.
Good to be back.
Yeah, I organized my office and I moved my desk, so this is.
I was about to say the background looks different too.
I know I don't have all my artwork. My artwork's over there. I have a really big office.
Yeah, you've got so many books in the background. Oh,
I know this is. If I had read one or two of them, it'd be better. But I just buy books and I don't read. Okay, that's true.
But what's been happening since the past 2 or 3 months? What's been
same old. Church was really cool today. We had in our little Sacramental Charismatic church, we had 6 baptisms today. We celebrated the Eucharist, we prayed, we sang some songs. I preached on spiritual warfare and discernment in the Holy Spirit, so yeah, it was cool.
That's amazing. 6 baptisms? Jeez.
Yeah, 6. Yeah, I think we've had the last baptism service we did 2 months ago. I want to say it was in February. I think we had 7 to 9, something like that. So,
wow.
It's pretty cool when you have baptisms and people actually get baptized. That's what I found. It's kind of encouraging. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool too, just due to seeing people make a decision to follow Jesus is great, and then to put their faith into action by publicly identifying with Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection is a big deal. It was actually interesting. I started out the morning as I do most Sunday mornings, and I started out at 6:30 thinking, I better figure out what I'm going to preach on. Just kidding. Maybe not.
He's not kidding.
Yeah. No, maybe writing a sermon, but no, I had I had a gist of an outline. I knew what I was going to do, but I was kind of meditating on it a little bit and was really kind of discouraged. It was kind of interesting. I was like, man, I don't really know if this whole pastoring thing is worth it. Because I've got 20 years now of senior co-lead pastor life, and there's a lot to pastoring sometimes, and I was kind of just like, I don't know, and and then everything that could go wrong in a church service before the service literally happened. We had, we had our computer. We have had 0 problems with our computer for a long time. Sound issues. Everything happening right before the service. And I'm like, okay, well, I have learned that that's probably an indication that something either good is going to happen or something that needs to happen is before us. So anyway, but when I was watching one person in particular, we've always had, new people hanging around, but there's these 2 brothers that have been coming for a while. I think 2 months with one of their wives, and their whole family came to watch them get baptized. And one of them did sickest mullet I've ever seen. I mean, it's like, dude, I wish I was allowed to have that mullet. It's so powerful. You feel God's glory coming off of it. Yeah. And but he was sitting there in the baptismal fount or tank or hot tub. And as he was sitting there, he was just, the joy on his face was like, dude, this is like totally worth it. And, and watching people. And then we had one person who decided to get baptized at the end of this, came up when we were about to sing a final song, who, came forward and said, I want to get baptized too. And it's somebody I've been talking with the last couple of weeks about surrendering their life to Jesus. And they've been saying that they want to do that. And so today was like, they finally did it. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's incredible.
How about you? I mean, you're just like you're just like a dad now.
I mean, I'm awake right now, which is like a miracle. And, it's been like the best thing. The day after she was born, we actually got released into the biggest snowstorm Portland seen in 80 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the worst night of my life, because we were about to drive onto the highway and get onto the road. And then this guy walks up past us and told us that he had just abandoned his car on the I-5 because they hadn't moved in 3 hours. And I've got a 1-day-old in the back seat with a wife that's half dead and no food or water. And
if I know you at all, you probably had like 1/8 of a tank of gas. Is that true? Don't lie. Okay.
So that was the other thing. I was like, we can't even get stuck in there because we're going to run out of gas because I have to keep the car on all night. And I was like, this is literally the worst. And then on top of that, all the hotels were fully booked in the area because everyone was booking a hotel. Then on top of that, I called the hospital and I was like, hey, we just got discharged. Can we come back? And they said no, because there's no medical reason. And I was like, what is going on? And so I drove back to the hospital. It was like only a mile away because we'd only moved a mile. And I was like, well, I guess we're going to sit in the car garage for the whole night. And I was like, no. So we walked back to labor delivery. We literally knocked on the door and we were like, we're here. You're going to have to kick us out pretty much if you want us to leave. And the charge nurse actually overrid the supervisor and snuck us into the hospital, pretty much gave us a room. So it's been all uphill since, all downhill, all uphill since then. Because it's like, that was like the worst. That was like everything, like I can handle lack of sleep. I'm in my own bed. So, but otherwise, apart from that, everything's been going good. I've just preached today.
You preached today at your church,
preached today on Come Holy Spirit, part of the series.
Did you take my advice about what that topic means?
Just so everybody knows, this is what Luke said I should say about the phrase.
You asked the question.
I just asked what the phrase "Come Holy Spirit" means to everyone, and Luke said that it's the magical formula that makes all the weird stuff happen. So that's why we still.
I would say I'm not wrong.
Folks.
I would say I'm not wrong.
Dear Lord, that's why we have this podcast, to provide education to Luke.
Yeah. Weird is not always bad, though, right?
Oh man. No, so actually, and then in professional life, I'm actually writing with a colleague. We're doing a whole paper on spiritual care assessments for patients with dementia. So it's going cool. Really, really cool. Really excited reading up all about spiritual issues and just patients with dementia, how to provide care for them and stuff like that. So that's really exciting. But that's what's been happening with us.
That's cool. A lot of good stuff. Well, I wanted to mention to anybody who's listening to this podcast, it would really help us out if you would obviously subscribe, like, share. But we have started a Substack. You and I have both had I know I've had at least 87 different blog places I've written things at. But we've started a Sacramental Charismatic Substack that's linked below, and you can subscribe to that, and kind of keep up to date with what we're going to be writing, contributing, creating. It'll be kind of a one-stop source for that. And one of the ways that you can subscribe, obviously there's a free subscription. We are going to release some content that will only be available to those who are part of our paid subscription, just because we're hoping to be able to raise some support to help cover some of the costs related to the podcast and creating content and whatnot. So we had somebody shout out to Jeff, who subscribed the other day and did subscribe for the whole year. And that was like super. I was like, oh, people do this thing. Like, oh,
Apparently,
so yeah. I mean, it's because I'm just going to go out and say my goal is to my goal. Wes, you probably have your own, but my goal is to somehow figure out a way to be able to financially have this become a sustainable thing where we can have you be full-time. You move to Red Bluff, be full-time. Why are you laughing? Your wife's family's here, man. I'm prophesying right now. Receive, bro. Yeah, but I mean, on a serious level, I think, that's kind of the goal, is to create a sustainable model for us to be able to create a lot more content to be able to help the church. And so that'd be helpful. So if you are somebody out there listening and you like what we do, we would love to encourage you to consider, supporting us in a financial way so we can keep on doing that. But we're going to keep on putting on a lot of free content because obviously we want to help out as many people as we can.
And we love doing this. So
that's true. Yeah. So for you, you're like,
I'll speak for myself. Like,
freedom from the baby, freedom from the baby. Yeah. So that's kind of cool. So we've kind of returned to writing, which is
speaking of writing, you just released an article the other day where you were quite open and honest about your thoughts regarding a certain individual named Alan Scott.
Could I just point out that I don't think I'm ever not open and honest about my thoughts?
That is true. That we'll give you that. Like, you don't need to worry about where you stand with Luke, because he'll probably just tell you.
I will.
But yeah, it was a really good article, and it came from the article from the Julie Royce article that spoke about how there had been a lot of abuse that has happened under his leadership over the years, going all the way back to his time in Scotland and Ireland, and has sort of followed him all the way to Anaheim Vineyard, the dwelling place now.
Yeah. Formerly the Anaheim
Vineyard, the dwelling place. And also Jeremy Riddle too was someone that has been accused of being spiritually abusive within that scope. So yeah, why don't you just sort of tell us, like, what well, first of all, let's say this, like, a lot of people, at least, growing up in the church, there's definitely a culture of, like, let's not publicize our dirty laundry. Let's deal with it in-house. It's not good to do that. And I have a huge issue with that. And I wish there was more transparency about these things. So why don't you tell us why you felt it was really important to write this article and be as forefront and forthcoming as you were?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I that's a great question. I don't know if I spent much time thinking.
You're just like, well, that's great. That's a great answer. Yeah.
Most of my writing has historically been me processing, like my own theological, I don't know, questions and at the same time too, we've done 2 previous episodes on the Anaheim situation, and and that I don't think we went into that lightly. We actually waited for quite a while before you and I went more public with our perspective on things. But I mean, I hate to say that I don't think we were prophetic by any means when we said multiple times that it seemed like there was spiritual abuse happening in the very act of pulling a whole entire church community out of the movement that it's been a part of forever, and watching, hundreds of people leave your church because you just don't care enough to care or do anything differently. So that was, so I mean, we both, I think, said numerous times, this is spiritually abusive. And then it just seemed like, hey, there's enough evidence there. But at the same time, too, nothing was public at all. There was maybe some questions, but I mean, I think you and I both probably felt like, I don't need to have anybody tell me their story in order to know there's spiritual abuse happening.
Yeah.
So I read the Royce Report article and, was like, okay, now we have actual evidence for it. Let's reflect a little bit about it, because I would hope that in the movement I'm a part of and you're a part of, as well as any charismatic church that is rooted in a biblical theological approach with the kingdom as center, that we would want to avoid everything we see in Alan Scott's methodology. And then, I had to also think about, John Wimber has got a lot of influence outside of the vineyard. A lot of people who look to John Wimber as being, a spiritual father to them. And so when you look at the model that John Wimber lived out as a leader, you see, first of all, John Wimber was not perfect. There's things that John Wimber did, said, taught that I'm sure people will say, I don't agree with that. I mean, there's things that I don't agree with, some of the things that John Wimber has done, which would be fun to talk about at some point in time.
Yeah.
But my love, appreciation, value, and the impact that John Wimber made on my life is, incalculable. So anybody who would say, hey, Wimber really embodied a really effective model of preaching, pastoring, leading, all that, would have to say there's a stark contrast between John Wimber and Alan Scott. And so for any of us who are influenced by John Wimber, I think part of the reason of fleshing out some of the concerns I have had about Alan Scott are so we can really think about it. Like, the emphasis on hype, or being a hero of my own story every single time, dude, like, I mean, as I have done my homework on Alan's stuff. I've listened to probably hundreds of sermons at this point in time. I've forced myself into it, and read a lot and listened. And I mean, you and I actually, I want to say at least 7 years ago, would have conversations about the amount of Platonic dualism that existed on his Twitter account. I was like, oh, whoa. So I guess part of it too is, so when I'm thinking about some of the end goals would be, number one, hoping to process some of my thinking on this matter, because I want to try to avoid some of those activities. Two, would be to put language to the concerns that other folks in our world would have had. Three would be, I think, I'm hoping, and I know that this has happened, that there might be people who were still trying to hang on and still trying to check things out in the dwelling place world, that they might stumble upon this stuff and have to wrestle with the implications of what evidence seems to be there. And then what happened, interestingly enough, is the day I published that article, I mean, I had now it's about 7 different people who were victims of spiritual abuse under Alan Scott reach out to me and first just say, it was very humbling in some ways, because as just I'm writing stuff, but like thanking me for believing them, which was, I was like, well, I don't even know who you are. First of all, I believed you, but I do believe you. So it was cool to see. It was encouraging to those folks to hear that that they're not crazy, that there are people who have observed these things, who are willing to stand with them. And I can't say a whole lot more than that, because each one of those people, several of them have not yet, it's not public yet. They're still working through some of that. But I mean, the accusations are so serious and so grieving that I felt like for me, it would be almost sinful not to say something, that's kind of, and it was interesting because obviously, there's some people who I've had some conversations with that are like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if we should talk about these in public, kind of the same thing we were just talking about, where it's, it's an embarrassment for the church. It's like, Yeah, I just wonder if it's more embarrassing that the church doesn't say anything. That's my feeling on that. And then as you know, I mean, I'm pretty open about sharing my opinion on things, but I don't like generally write articles about people specifically. I generally try
Hmm.
to critique perspectives, viewpoints, ideas
Yeah.
rather than people because, but interestingly enough, not everybody, a lot of people have a hard time associating their perspective from their identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
No,
Kind of
I
weird.
think that's important. And like, if you take it from a victim point of view, like if you're a
Yeah.
victim in this thing, I like it must be so relieving to have someone be able to write about this and show the different ways that it's wrong because I bet you a lot there's probably some people out there that didn't even know that that was abuse. And now they're reading this or hearing about this for the
Yeah.
first time and going, holy smokes, like that makes so much sense what I've been feeling
Oh man.
this way or whatever. And then to have like an article or a written piece of content that can just sort of break that down can be
Hmm.
so helpful for someone. And I, I, I can just imagine that happening. So,
Yeah. I mean,
um,
that was kind of that was the, I mean, I was really kind of shocked actually by that. Because yes, I mean, like I've obviously been very forthright in my opinion on Twitter about the situation because it's like we were public about it, I think
mhm,
for about a month. And then it's like, I don't know, people just moved on. And that's fine. But
yeah,
like, it does not, like, I don't know. Maybe I don't move on very well, but it's like, you know, I was really surprised at how many people who were, like I said, actual victims of spiritual abuse, and then people who didn't quite experience it in the same way, like on a personal level, but who were a part of the dwelling place over the last
mm,
previously as part of the Anaheim Vineyard since probably 2018, 2019, or whenever Alan Scott started pastoring there, and then have left within the last 6 months, and having them talk about their experience just from an unhealthy church perspective. Um,
yeah,
it kind of, I think, gave them language to understand what's probably going on underneath the surface that's causing
mhm,
some of these really questionable, hyped up, nonsensical
yeah.
spirituality things that are happening. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wrote something. I haven't written anything for a really long time. So it's like,
Yeah.
do I even know how to construct sentences? But
Well, let's go into it a little bit. I'm just looking at your article right now, but for you, reading the article, the Royce article, what stood out to you as being like, this is like really concerning to me?
oh man, well, I mean the control stuff. Well, and here's another thing too. I want to just say because I've had some folks in our movement who have. It's always interesting, right? Because like there are things that I have to say. If we're being honest, I don't want to just point a bunch of fingers at everybody else and not be willing to evaluate our complicity as,
Hmm.
and so I don't mean per se an individual, it's not
Yeah.
individual, but yet at the same time too, there are individual leaders who are involved in leadership and national levels within different aspects of the vineyard, both
Hmm.
here and then in other countries. So it was interesting to me how like there are definitely some people who are like, hey, you know, lay off on asking questions
So,
about, yeah. And I'm just like,
yeah.
yeah, but I feel like, my ability or anybody's ability to really raise questions about um, unjust or unethical or problematic things, we have to be honest and talk about it from all, like, it's, to me, I still
Hmm.
don't know. I don't understand how Alan Scott was hired in the first place, and
Yeah.
I don't mean that to say that there was any intentional deception on the part of any hiring people or national leaders or anything like that too.
Yeah.
But we at least admit that there should have been some red flags, you know? Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't mind saying it, but in the Royce article, it showed, I think they talked about how they, the one back in the early days in Alan's first role in leadership, there
yeah,
was
Glasgow. Yeah.
his friend, Colin, who
Yeah.
wrote to Vineyard UK,
Yeah.
like explaining like, hey, this is happening, and there wasn't really much of a response. And so I'm
Yeah.
not trying to like call out, but I think those are very big
Yeah.
questions
Well,
that sort
yeah.
of like,
And also too, it's like, I think the challenge of a movement that is less organized as other denominations, things fall. I mean, I know things fall through the cracks in our
yeah,
local church all the time. So
totally.
it would, it would make perfect sense that something could have
Yeah,
easily fallen through the cracks. It's serious, and it doesn't mean we should give a pass on that. But I don't think that necessarily means to imply that there was somebody who intentionally, you know.
yeah,
But at the same time, too, it seems like in charismatic churches, we have a track record of putting people's charismatic gifting, personality, leadership
yeah,
potential. We put those things above character
yeah,
all the time. I mean,
yeah,
I've done that. As a pastor, allowing people to stay in leadership that like on later on, it's like, oh, that was a mistake.
yeah,
So that was concerning. But the for me, what was the most concerning thing was the methodology or the hermeneutic of, God told me this, it's a secret, I'll tell you someday, dangling a carrot in front of somebody.
that that made
Yeah.
my insides just,
Yeah.
and the reason why I was like, oh, I know that's true is because Alan said that on stage when he announced the split from the Vineyard. He
I
said
remember.
on stage that the Lord has given me something, but you as a church are
Yeah.
not ready to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
I
Lord
was like,
shall name this house. I mean, yeah. Again, it's like these things are classic neo-Pentecostal
yeah,
things. So that part was like, dude, just as a pastor, I mean, any other situation, someone came and told me like, hey, my boyfriend said this, or my girlfriend said this, or this spiritual leader, or like my small group leader told me this, dude, we would drop the hammer, because that's one of the things that we teach people, that these things there should never be secret prophecies and, stuff
hmm
like that. So that's why I was like, man, we can learn from John Wimber here. Wimber had a whole, helpful guideline on prophetic ministry and lots of his writings about that, or, teachings. That was a problem. The body types, we only put people who are shiny and pretty up. And if you're not, if you don't have the body type that I have decided is attractive, then you don't get to be on stage. And that's been confirmed by some of the victims I've talked to. And then I also have to say, the purity guidelines was almost it was, as I was reading it, I was like, this is a comedy. This is so it's comical. Like, we need to bring revival because, again, Alan Scott sees himself as a revivalist, right?
hmm
So in order to bring revival and get God to show up, then we have to have holiness, in a certain way. So I want female staff members to confront male volunteers about
That was
masturbation.
crazy.
Yeah, I was
I
just
was
like,
like,
well,
what?
yeah. And then and then it was like, well, if he's done it at all, he's out. Oh, he's 19. Well, I did it until I was 21, so it's okay. I mean, like, look, it's just,
What?
I mean, it's so absurd. It's hard to take serious, but then it is serious, like that's kind of what was happening for me, was like, if this was this is like it should be like it's the Babylonian bee or the onion, about just ridiculousness. Oh wait, this is happening in a church by someone who considers himself an apostle. Like, dude, we got
Yeah,
problems.
yeah.
So yeah.
I I listened to not all of it, but most of the staff meetings that they posted a link to, that they
Mm-hmm.
had a recording of. And that
Yeah,
was also super revealing because in those
totally.
staff meetings, Alan was contrasting the church to like where it was to where it is now. And sort of was like taking a sociological view as to like where they are in terms of numbers. And
Yeah.
I could totally see what he was trying to do because he was mentioning and referring to the fact that they were at an impact stage
Mm-hmm.
where they were trying to make an impact around the world.
Yeah.
That's his goal, is to make
Yeah.
an impact
Global.
around a global impact around the
Yeah.
world, and that's what he felt they were called to do. And I was like, Oh, that's his end game, is to create
Yeah.
massive global impact. Because he even said, he was like, the church down the road with 40 people, that's great. Let them do their thing. Sort of like they just going to have their potlucks after church, and people
Hmm.
go there who just want to have intimacy, and they'll always stay at 40. And then he contrasted, and I was just like, just the way
Yeah.
he was talking about it was just like so like,
It's the worst ecclesiology
yeah.
out there. It's also, again, it's so pastorally cruel. I mean, I've used that phrase to describe his leadership many times, but it's pastorally cruel to the local church. And it just goes to show that the desire again is for, it sounds cool. Like, I just want the kingdom of God to be international and global. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, but what you're trying to do is just have more influence on a large scale model.
and
And, the
colonize.
people who, yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. It's just, it's not good. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I would say that, out of the thousands of people that have read, I've, had a lot of people reach out. And the vast majority, it's been interesting to hear just, like, oh, this was, like, I now understand the differences, too. So I think he's revealed himself, like he revealed himself to confirm the questions and the problems that we've, that many folks have had over the years. So,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
yeah, it's sad, I mean, because none of this, this doesn't mean he's going to stop doing that. That's the other thing. What I've
yeah,
seen is he doubles down. There's doesn't seem like there's a lot of humility, and I mean, you listen to the staff meetings. I mean, it's like, dude, I do not understand how anybody could actually submit themselves under that type of leadership because the arrogance is just like next level.
hmm,
So it's like he seems to just double down. The confidence slash pride factor does definitely concern me a little bit, but because it's been like, dude,
yeah,
what Christianity Today wrote an article, the Royce Report. It's not like these are
yeah,
small, low impact, right? I mean, like we, I think the stuff we've put out, we've gotten a lot, we've gotten thousands of listens and views, but that's not that impressive, really. Christianity Today probably what, I don't know, 50,000, 70,000,
yeah,
I don't even know,
easily.
million. Yeah, big. Royce Report seems pretty big too. So, but yeah, it's kind of
So, so
discouraging
I
to.
know, I know that there's probably some pastors or leaders or just people in the church in general. Well, I'll say this first is I think one of the troubling things about what's preventing anything from happening is that the dwelling place is so insulated because it's all people that Alan has surrounded, like it's his people that he's surrounded himself with.
Hmm.
And so within the structure of the church, there isn't a ton of accountability.
No, I mean,
Um,
that's the
and
problem with a capital A apostle
yeah,
model. You have, you get rid of the old folks and then put in people who will just say yes. I mean, because again, I'd like to point out there were board members who resigned after the decision to disassociate with the vineyard. One of them, Peter Gregg, I'm going to, just from what I know of him, and I know people who are friends with him, I think he's a man with integrity. I wish he would have been more forthright. I think he will probably have to be more forthright in future depositions with the lawsuit. But I think he resigned because, as he said, this was something that he hadn't signed up for, essentially, right?
yeah,
The other folks the other person who you were tweeting with and never got a response from, resigned with no statement at all. But everybody else seems to be like, yeah, let the man of God, the apostle, apostolize.
well,
So,
yeah. And I mean, there's other big people like Bannon Lipscher. I don't know if
mhm.
that's how you pronounce it. Like he's one
Jesus
of the
culture.
leaders in Jesus culture, and so there's people that are there that are part of this that also have
Yeah.
not said anything.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's all to say. I just, I'm just wondering. There's some pastors that are going, oh, they might be internalizing this and going, oh, I need to be careful about this. And it's true. Like, I think this is a moment for the whole church and specifically charismatic churches, like you said, like that we can be susceptible to this type of leadership happening within our churches.
Hmm.
Like what can pastors do to help be aware, mitigate, create
Mm.
safeguards,
You mean
all of that
about spiritual
stuff.
abuse or hostile
Yeah,
takeovers?
yeah, spiritual abuse. Well, I mean, there's stuff like that, like just don't do a hostile takeover. That's an easy one. But I do know that there's probably some pastors that are going, oh, I really want to be intentional about this moving forward. What
Mm.
can we do? And I don't know if you like as a pastor, I know you've said like you've mentioned like, oh, this is a general wake up call, but like, what do you think pastors can do to create safeguards in the church?
Oh, that's good. Well, I mean, first and foremost, it would seem like having systems in place that allow for victims to be able to voice, issues, or accusations,
Hmm.
whether it's your board, and having people know who the board members are. Plurality of leaders seems to be another thing, and I mean, for me, I just what I learned a lot of this. I am not the person who came up with these things, but the things that I've learned from really good leaders. Like one thing is I don't ever want to have my leadership team be people who will agree with me. In fact, I intentionally, as you know, because you're a part of our team, it's like
Yeah.
I actually like having people who I don't agree with.
Yeah.
Don't agree with me. One of my favorite people in our church community, Terry, who like
Yeah.
she, I know, like she's a part of our board. Terry is a moral, strong, ethical
Hmm.
person, and I know I mean, she has had no problem with saying I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, so I like I think I think that'd be some areas, having processes to address issues, building systems that are going to not insulate abusers, and protect them, but that will actually make it harder for them to do that. We do
Yeah.
some of these things for kids ministry, right? In the same way we
Yeah.
do what we can to protect kids. I think we could do that with adults. Yeah, and obviously the bylaws and board things with the local church are important to stay up on, so that way you don't have somebody come in and but it's interesting because I've been following a little bit. I haven't fully, like, I can't say I know all of his work, but Matthew D. Taylor, who's on Twitter, he is the one who you may know about his he did a podcast about like the white Jesus, American white Jesus, or
Okay.
something like that. I can't remember the exact title of
Yeah.
it. We'll link in the bottom here, but he has done a lot of work on NAR, the New Apostolic
Oh, yes.
Reformation,
Yeah.
and what he has indicated is that through a lot of his research is that this is a common theme through the NAR community, is to take over churches and to impose their apostolic Christianity, their brand, their version of apostolic Christianity
Mm.
onto those local churches.
Yeah.
It's the whole Danny Silk culture of honor motif, because what a lot of people don't realize about that book is that it's because a lot of people read it. Oh, it's about honor, and it's about
More than that.
honor culture. Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
ecclesiology. It is
Yeah.
actually a charismatic ecclesiology that suggests that in order to have God's presence, will, blessing, revival, a revival culture, that's the language, then what has to happen is for the church to be led, governed by the fivefold ministry, and that particular way of understanding the definition of apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and
Hmm.
teachers.
Hmm.
So anyway, that I think Matthew Taylor's content has been helpful too. I really appreciated. I had listened to that podcast, and I think it was like because I was trying to. People ask me all the time, "Have you listened to this?" Whenever I send a tweet about NAR stuff, people always like, that's like one of the
Yeah.
things. And I did, but I was like, I've been down that road. I don't, it was like, yeah, I confirmed all my suspicions. It's not good, but now I'm like, people need to listen to his podcast, the episodes, which we'll link in the description, because it's like, if you really want to understand what's happening on a local church level, and theologically, he does a really good job of fleshing that out. And what I loved is he was able to differentiate quite a bit between John Wimber and why John Wimber, for instance, differed from C. Peter Wagner. He fleshes that out, and what I really like too is that he has helped me understand the differences between C. Peter Wagner's NAR, because he's the one who coined that term really and came up with the very beginning of it, and Bethel. There's actually some differences between Bethel and the classic central.
Oh, interesting.
NAR. Yeah, it's like he's.
Oh, I always put them together, so that's interesting.
Yeah, most people do. Yeah, you should definitely listen to his stuff, and just following him on Twitter would be good, because I think he says some really great things. But I think those are some things that churches can do, but have better theology. Pastors could get better theology. I mean, seriously, and actually, that's kind of a dumb thing to say. Let me take that back. It's not just like get better theology, like you push a button. But be intentional with what you read. I mean,
take it seriously.
Yeah, like starting out, start out with like, let's get the basics. Let's center ourselves on the basics of the creed. The Apostles' Creed. Michael Bird has a really great book on the Apostles' Creed. That would be really great for people to understand those basics. He's also got a really great biblical theology called Evangelical Theology. It's a systematic theology written by a biblical scholar, which is why it's great. And then there's some really great charismatic. John Wimber, dude. I just feel like, I feel like that's probably everybody knows you're the John Wimber guy. John Wimber has, through power healing, power evangelism, PowerPoints, the way on is the way in. Everybody gets to play. There's some really great books that he wrote that would help us be really good charismatics, because I mean, I don't think anybody could argue that John Wimber was not a charismatic. I mean, dude operated. And I mean, I think if we're going to use the word apostle, I have a hard time thinking that John Wimber was not an apostle. And I would say capital A apostle. If we're talking biblical apostle, he's Now, he would never use that term.
He would never,
but he's got a really great paper that I want to, we're going to eventually address on the fivefold ministry that is in one of his Vineyard Reflections. That is like, dude, it's so good. Like, actually, for those of us in the Vineyard, hey, you want to know a way forward to wrestle with some of these things? Go back and read John Wimber. That'd be good.
No, I think that's all really, really good. Yeah. And I'm also just talking about John Wimber. I was, when I was doing my sermon today, I was actually doing research on the origins of Come Holy Spirit in the Vineyard. And I didn't realize this, but he was, when John Wimber went to England and was ministering over there, actually Nicky Gumbel was heavily impacted by that. And I was just thinking about how John Wimber never went to go plant vineyard churches. Like, he wasn't about building this massive thing for himself. It was like, hey, we're going to go equip other churches in other denominations. And
a lot of people don't realize that, because now there's a whole vineyard, in the UK. But early on, and I know this firsthand from many now vineyard leaders who are part of the, they're part of the classic original team, is that coming from the Assemblies of God, Mike Turgiano, it'd be somebody who Wimber was like, nah, you don't need to plant a vineyard. Just be a really good follower of Jesus in the Assemblies of God. Or, Wimber went to New Zealand when I heard this story when I was over there in 2018 or 19 or whenever I was there. He went there, and there was what became the New Zealand vineyard. They were called something else, and I can't remember that. Maybe it was Harvest Ministries or something like that. But they were Wimber committed to not plant vineyard churches in New Zealand because he wanted to just encourage the local evangelical charismatic churches over there. And so all these guys and gals were, part of this, they were all vineyard, that they were a vineyard. Wow. And Wimber was like, no, you guys can't have a vineyard. And finally, Lloyd Rankin, who was the national director over there, him and his wife Victoria, who are just the most amazing, precious people ever. He finally, I think when he told me the story, and I actually have this on our YouTube channel, an interview with him, but he was like, John, we're your orphans. We're spiritual orphans, essentially. Let us be our spiritual father. And then
Yeah.
Wimber finally relented, and then the vineyard, what was already a vineyard, became a vineyard movement there. But yeah, I mean, Wimber, you could not say he was really about equipping the saints. Period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was we grew up in the for those of us who grew up in the vineyard, there was very much a sense of Wimber wanting to bless the whole church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why we've always, like, I think about, we had somebody new at church today who, after the baptisms, walked up to me and was like, hey, I was baptized as a Catholic when I was a baby. I haven't been in a Catholic church since that day. I don't really know, much. What do you think I should get rebaptized? And so skipping over the answer to that question, one thing that I had told her was that, hey, one thing about us as a church, because she kind of was like, I don't know, is our Catholics okay? I was like, man, the Vineyard movement, historically, we've had a really great relationship with the Catholic tradition.
Yeah.
I am not Roman Catholic, strongly, definitely, for sure, not Roman Catholic, but I have no problem acknowledging that there's many Catholic brothers and sisters in Christ, and I have a respect for that tradition. And I love that Wimber traveled around and spoke at charismatic Catholic conferences and was beloved by, our local Red Bluff Catholic Church. I've been there before for different special services like Ash Wednesday, and they sang Vineyard songs there, like old classic Vineyard songs. Yeah. So anyway, I think that says a lot about Wimber, so obviously, he'd be a great place for us to return to. Cause I think that what I'm finding in my life is that I'm rereading a lot of John Wimber things that I know I read, years ago, and I'm rereading him, and I'm like, man, he was so brilliant and ahead of the game in so many areas that it's like, it's like somebody should publish his stuff today under a different name, but not change anything. And just, in fact, I'm going to do that. Maybe that's what the Sacramental Charismatic is. So,
well, I say that I say all that to say is that, like, I think if you're a pastor and you're pastoring your church and whatever, I think one of the ways in which you can get yourself out of trouble really quickly is if you're aware of stuff that you're trying to protect, because as soon as you're trying to protect something, you're going to probably want to ignore anything that jeopardizes it. And my thinking about that was, for John, it was like, he didn't need to protect anything. He was constantly trying to, like, not build anything for himself and not create something in which he was around him. He was trying to give it away all the time, right? And so I think if there's a posture and there's stuff that you're building in the culture where you're constantly trying to give away, or you're constantly trying to move outwards and not build your own thing and focus on others, it may be easier to go, oh, we need to look at that because I'm not worried about protecting that ministry or that thing or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
That's good. Yeah. Like having too much ownership on a particular area, theme.
Totally.
Ministry. Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah. And that sort of becomes a quote unquote idol or something like that. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. And I think maybe too, that idea of how can pastors, I think that kind of gets to what we were going to spend some time talking about today, is the future of the Sacramental Charismatic, because the podcast originally started, actually, I'll back up even before that, I want to say 15 years ago, maybe a little bit, maybe 18 years ago, when I was doing my MDiv, I had to read some theology that was sacramental a bit,
Yeah.
And I was like, what's that? I'm from the Vineyard. We don't do that, And so I kind of shot across the bow, so to speak, where it was like, oh man, there's all these other traditions out there that might have some helpful stuff, because it sounds like some of them actually, like, they sound charismatic.
Yeah.
Is what I was like. I don't know. They're talking about the Holy Spirit a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then probably about 15 years ago, really starting to wrestle with sacramentality and the idea of God using natural means, or natural, signs or symbols or whatever to communicate pneumatological grace.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, and I just, through reading and then starting to talk to other folks, I started to identify somewhat of what I would call a sacramental charismatic worldview or perspective in my own, I was not the first one by any means, but I was thinking that way.
Yeah.
And then I started, I think, writing. I wrote some papers on the subject for different conferences. And then I had several friends who were like, dude, that should be like your thing. And I was like, that is my thing, man. And they're like, no, you should like really make it your thing. And so I started the podcast in 2020, just interviewing various people. And I was just having conversations with people because we were all stuck in our houses and couldn't leave.
Yeah.
And then I think, it dawned on me in the last maybe, since we've been talking for about 8 months, 9 months more, about like, hey, all the stuff that I've been doing on John Wimber and my life as a lead pastor in a church that's putting into practice this sacramental charismatic tapestry and trying to like weave in between these different worlds and trying to take the best and go, like Wimber used to say. It actually all goes together. So it's not like Luke as this co-lead pastor of a vineyard church, Luke as this John Wimber, advocate, Luke as this sacramental charismatic. It's like, all that is all part of it. And then, our friendship, obviously, it's just natural, because when we hang out, what do we talk about? Like,
pretty much this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So like going forward, what I've really have had a sense from the Holy Spirit that, I think like 7 years ago, when I transitioned from our previous church to here, before that I was really, really, really like productive as a writer. I mean, it was like I wrote a lot, and at one time I ran a blog that we had on average 100,000 plus viewers or readers per month. Yeah, it was crazy. And then when we moved here, going from having the space, because we had a pretty healthy established church at the time. Yeah. We had a lot of team leaders. I had more time to write. It felt like we got here. It's like hit the ground running. Church grew really quickly. Just not a lot of time for that. But in the last 6 months, I've had, like, as we've talked, I think we both had a growing, like, hey, we actually have some things to say that might be helpful for other pastors, because every week I have, I don't know, a dozen pastors reach out to me and ask me for book recommendations or advice on how to do, and I used to just write an art. I would literally, back in the day, I'd write a blog really quick and just send it to them, like, here.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So our future of wanting to be more intentional toward helping folks who are in our world, which I think we kind of blend this like historical classic evangelicalism of the Bebbington quadrilateral variety, right? Not like the political craziness, but that charismatic theology and practices, sacramentality, having a value for the Eucharist, baptism, and other sacramental practices, litanies, things like that. I just think that it's super fun, and also too, you and I are like, we're trying to figure out in our local churches, what does this look like? So
totally.
having these open conversations. So like, let's talk about some of the plans. This is the last episode for season 3. And then you and I are going to basically record, as many episodes in the next couple of weeks, so we can crank out on a weekly basis, as well as we're going to be writing articles and things like that on our Substack. What are we going to talk about? What have you determined?
What have I determined? Well, I think I think
Alan
some of
Scott,
this.
where every article will be on Alan Scott because that's what people keep asking. No, that.
Well, I mean, at this rate, there's like something happening every other week within the church, so it feels
Yeah.
like it might just be
Controversial
that.
subjects,
My
moral failure.
word.
I know, dude.
Well, I think some stuff is how to preach.
Mhm.
There's definitely something to that, and I think that's something. I mean, we both preach, but that's definitely part of your wheelhouse, just preaching a lot,
Yeah,
nearly every week and stuff.
yeah.
And there's good
As an aside,
resources. Yeah,
on that, I had like I don't know, like 10 to 15 people who like DM'd me about the Alan Scott thing. And
yeah,
what they were like, it was funny because they had nothing to do with Alan Scott. They didn't ask
yeah,
me that at all. It was like,
yeah,
hey, I want to have more. Could you help me understand more about the don't be a hero of your own story thing? Because I feel like that's true. And actually, somebody posted a comment asking for that a little bit more about that on the
oh yeah,
actual article. But like every one of them asked for more thoughts on. However, I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember the way I worded it, but it was something like I said something along the lines of like for us, like being not the hero of every story is so important, like
yeah,
what was it? I can't remember how I worded it, but it was like, oh, here's how it was. When it came to like the idea of what's important in our movement in the vineyard, I said that like being like self-depreciating is
yeah.
homiletic currency,
It is.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, because one person in particular was saying how they're like, yeah, it just seems like that's like, kind of, I hadn't really thought it out, but Steve Burnhope and I, who Steve's been on our podcast before, really good friend of ours in England, like he and I both talked about how like when I'm in England preaching at his vineyard, or the church he pastored for a long time, like the more self-depreciating I am, the more
yeah,
the UK vineyard people like eat it up. And then when
yeah,
he comes here and he makes fun of himself, as you've seen,
yeah.
it's the same thing. It's so
Same
funny
thing. Yeah,
how it's like a universal. And I've done it in vineyards in Mexico. I've done it in vineyards
yeah.
in Kenya. And it's like, yeah, the more that we are
Same.
just a bunch of fat people trying to go to heaven, as Wimber
According
would
to
say.
Wimber. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we should do some stuff on that. How to be self-depreciating.
To be self-depreciating. Yeah.
Don't take yourself too
Don't take
seriously.
yourself too
Yeah.
seriously. No,
You
I
are a
think
joke.
yeah. Get over it.
Yeah.
Um,
Accept it. I'm a moron.
no, I mean that's it. Uh, I know when I was doing my chaplaincy residency and I was friends with someone in the Episcopal Church, and I just spoke about like how I was writing a part. I was doing a self-depreciating story, and she was like, "Oh, you guys share stories about yourself?" And I was like, "You don't?" And she was like, "Never." Ever would I do that? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So I think that there is something to that. I mean, it
Yeah.
is like there's a way to do it, is what we're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
That,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, we'll flesh that out because it's like
yeah,
the point I was making was that I think you should if you are telling stories about yourself, it's more effective usually to do stories of how you failed because I think
yes.
it gives you more credibility with the community that you're speaking to. But then when you tell hero stories, you should find like you want to tell hero stories about other people
Other
who are
people,
in your church.
yes,
Yeah, because
exactly, yeah,
it helps support the everybody gets to play.
yeah,
Yeah. So we're going to talk about how to preach,
yep,
how to be sacramental charismatics. We'll
yeah.
talk more about that.
Just in
Uh,
general,
yeah.
big one, open table. We
Yeah,
might
we need
spend
to.
two
We're gonna.
episodes on that one.
We're gonna. Yeah, we've talked about that for a while about
Yeah,
laying out a case for the open table as opposed to what a lot of churches have is a closed table. That's a
yeah.
yeah.
And how actually a lot of churches are closed table but function on an open table. They
Yeah.
just don't want to like deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, oh, you guys are so cute and inconsistent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally.
Dude, this is so funny. So one of our friends, Scott, or not Scott, oh my gosh, Sean McMasters. I don't know where Scott came from.
Yeah,
Anyway, we were talking the other day, and I was like telling him how we were talking about the value of the Eucharist, and I was like, dude, I just want to let you know, like, I really like how you guys do it. And I was like, because I'm like super judgmental about the Eucharist. It's like the one thing I have an opinion
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
which is not true, but it's the one thing
yeah,
I really have an opinion on, because I always tease church or pastor friends that like do it on a monthly basis. And I'm like, you guys aren't Christian or what? Like,
yeah.
but I watched one of his services, a couple of them, and the way they do it, it was practicing open table. And it was so cool as we were talking about how, like, man, it's the theology of the kingdom and the ministry of Jesus and how he engages in mission around the table with people outside that's really shaped our understanding
Hmm.
of that subject. So I think, yeah, for us to flesh that out, it'll be a little bit more,
Yeah.
pretty fun.
No, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome. I knew when I was in seminary and I was wrestling with this. I went to our New Testament a professor who's very well known. I won't say his name, but he was an elder in the church, and I asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh, Paul would never ever advocate for an open table." And I was like, "But doesn't your church practice open table?" And he was like, "Well, so anyways, uh, so."
Yeah.
Anyways, that's when I was like, okay, something's up here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but anyway, okay, carry on. What else?
Well, we should, I think, more and more questions about sexual ethics, questions about
Hmm.
LGBTQ related topics would be probably. I would love to know your opinion on everything and have you talk about all of that, and I'll
Mine?
just
No,
sit and
I thought
listen
this
to it.
was. I thought that was the one you were wanting to do. So,
Oh, no, that I've said you should
okay.
talk about
Oh, gotcha.
the most
Okay.
controversial
The most
topic out
controversial
there, the one
topics.
that will get
I'll
more
be.
people. Yeah.
You'll be away that week. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I'll set up work and be
Okay.
like, all right. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. So
that's
I think that'd be good.
something I really want to talk about, and I'm pretty opinionated on, is non-anxious, like emotions in the
Hmm.
spiritual life. I think how we understand our emotions, and especially having a non-anxious presence, how that's actually harmful, and it's a
Hmm.
prevalent topic going around.
Yeah.
And then also contemporary worship. You know, I'll call him out, like this Sean Freud's, like worship leaders like him,
Hmm.
and what does that mean for how we view contemporary worship, the songs we sing? Is there
Hmm.
a place for it for the future in the church?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. We should have, think a little bit about, because we're going to have guests on too, but we need to have Jessica Lewis on
yeah, that'd
worship
be
because,
awesome.
yeah, I just like, she's just got so many great thoughts on worship, and Jessica is a therapist as well.
He is.
Yeah, so she would be really fun to. It'd be kind of interesting to think about the intersection between life as a therapist and worship.
Yeah, worship leader, yeah.
Yeah, be good. Disability
Uh,
theology, doing
disability, that'd be
more,
awesome. Hopefully, we can get a guest on for that.
yeah, leadership stuff. Yeah, Amos Young for disability theology.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd
Amos
be cool.
Young.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Leadership.
a lot of topics,
Yeah,
huh?
a lot of stuff, and then we'll also do some book reviews.
Mm,
This will probably be mostly on the Substack that we'll do book reviews and stuff.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. A lot of good opportunities, I think, for us to. And I think if you're listening to this too, and you have things that you would love for us to talk about, I will say this: if you are a paid subscriber, you will get first place in telling us what we should write about, and we will do it. But also, if you just are somebody who follows the podcast and listens in or chimes in and whatnot, we'd love to have your participation as we're thinking about what are the questions that people are wrestling with too.
mm,
Not just coming up with things that we're passionate about, but things that would be helpful for the church in general. That'd be good too. So yeah, well,
awesome.
we got through the future plans episode.
We got it, and
We
we
did
spoke
it.
about toxic leadership too.
I
So
know,
it was a
but
good episode.
oh, hey, I want to mention a book that that I had just picked up that was recommended to me by my friend Brian in relation to the Alan Scott stuff. And it's a book called When Narcissism Comes to Church. Have you heard that book? Heard of it?
Yes.
And have you read it?
I haven't. No.
Yeah. So I started reading it. It's really interesting. So the subtitle is Healing Your Community from Emotional and Spiritual Abuse. And that might be a fun, well, I don't know, fun. Maybe that's a bad word to use about that subject, but maybe we could try to see if we could get the author to be a part of our. It's Chuck DeGroat. I believe that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
It's really well written. It's kind of one of those things where it's super sad too, though. Just because like you would. I don't know. I think I had a really rough week last week due to what you had kind of brought up, because I was sitting and praying and just reading some scripture and drinking a cup of coffee and reflecting on, in 25 years, I think I've been in ministry in some capacity for like 25 something years now. And the amount of people that I started out with that have had moral failures, divorces, lost their churches, closed their churches, lost their faith, it's staggering. So I was kind of like, man, that's where I think that kind of was leading into my spiritual warfare moment this morning, where I'm like, oh, is any of this worth it? Is it like, and I don't mean that in a way that's like, I think either you and I are immune to any of those things that get people caught up. I think we're always one. I mean, one thing I've learned about hanging around the NA, AA communities is that people are always one devastating, traumatic experience away from, getting sucked into a life of drugs and, depression. And I mean, it's like nobody is immune to that. But on the other hand too, it's like, man, all these moral failures of leaders, it's like, dude, I just have a hard time sometimes wrapping my head around that, because, it's like, dude, you signed up to like serve people and to love people, and you're oppressing people. Like I don't.
Yeah. And I think it's like, sometimes I go like every other week, I'm like, oh, I should become Anglican or whatever it is. Yeah. But it's affecting every single part of the church, Catholic Church, Anglican Church. Like it's not because you're more liturgical in your service that's going to prevent you. It's not if you're high church, you're going to, that's not going to be the magic bullet that is going to make everything go away.
Yeah. I think that what you just said is probably one of the most important takeaways from this discussion, is that there is no magic bullet for character. There's no magic bullet for ethics. There's no magic bullet for church health.
Discipleship.
There is no, So that's good. Yeah. Well, hey, for everybody who tuned in for this episode, thanks for listening or watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts. They're also available on Podbean, and then available on YouTube. But again, check out the description below, and you'll find a link to our Substack. And we'd love to encourage you to take the time to subscribe. If you are like, hey, oh my gosh, Wes, he's a young father, I need to support him, I want to get him into this full-time writing and creative content management thing, I want to support that podcast, you could totally do that and become a paid subscriber. We would really love it. So far, there has been thousands of dollars spent over the last couple of years on creating content, and it would be awesome if we had some support. So if you could do that, that'd be great too.